The sun had barely cracked the horizon when Nora Callahan heard the horses. Not one or two, but dozens, maybe more, their hooves creating a low thunder that rolled across the dry Arizona plain like a storm approaching. She stood at the window of her small ranch house, coffee cup halfway to her lips, and felt her heart drop into her stomach. Outside, emerging from the dawn mist like spirits made flesh, Apache warriors materialized in a wide circle around her property. They sat motionless on their horses, painted for war, their faces hard as the desert stone. 300 men. Maybe more. She had never seen so many in one place. Their presence turned the air heavy, thick with purpose and barely restrained violence. Nora's hands trembled slightly as she set down her cup. Inside the back bedroom, Aita was still sleeping, recovering from the bullet wound that had nearly killed her just yesterday. The young Apache woman had stumbled into Nora's life, bleeding and desperate, and Nora had done what her heart demanded. She had saved her. Now it seemed that act of mercy might cost her everything. A single rider broke from the circle. He was enormous, taller than any man Nora had ever seen, his shoulders broad enough to block out the rising sun behind him. He rode slowly, hands raised and open, showing he carried no weapon in them. His horse picked its way carefully through the scrub brush until he was close enough that Nora could see his face. Weathered, strong, eyes the color of winter sky. He looked like a man who had seen too much and survived anyway. If you were this woman, living alone for years on this hard land, would you open your door to a stranger when 300 warriors surrounded your home on a morning that might be your last? Nora surprised herself. She walked to the door and opened it. She stepped out onto the porch, her worn cotton dress catching the morning breeze, her graying hair pulled back in a simple braid. She was 47 years old and had stopped caring what men thought of her appearance long ago. But standing there under the gaze of this giant, she felt something she had forgotten. She felt seen. "Ma'am," he said, his voice deep and careful, "my name is Samuel Thornton. I'm here to speak for the people you see around us. They're looking for someone. A young woman, the daughter of their chief." He paused, his eyes searching hers. "I think you might know where she is." Nora's throat went dry. She could lie. She could deny everything. But something in this man's face told her that lies would be useless here. And more than that, something in her own heart rebelled against the idea of lying at all. "She's inside," Nora said quietly. "She was shot. I've been taking care of her." The giant man's expression didn't change, but something softened in his eyes. Relief, maybe, or respect. "May I see her?" he asked. Nora hesitated only a moment before nodding. She turned and led him into her house, acutely aware of how small her home must seem to a man his size. He had to duck slightly to pass through the doorway. Inside, the house smelled of coffee and the herbs Nora had used to dress Aita's wound. She led Samuel to the back bedroom, where Aita lay sleeping, her breathing steady, her face peaceful despite the bandages wrapped around her shoulder. Samuel spoke in Apache, his voice gentle. Aita's eyes opened, and when she saw him, tears spilled down her cheeks. She answered him in rapid words that Nora couldn't understand, but the emotion was clear. Gratitude, relief, something that looked like hope. Samuel turned to Nora. "She says you saved her life, that you didn't hesitate, that you treated her like she mattered." His voice carried a weight that suggested this simple act was anything but simple. "Her father wants to meet you, to thank you, and to understand why a white woman would risk everything for his daughter." Nora felt the world shifting beneath her feet. "I didn't think about risk," she said honestly. "I just saw someone who needed help." "That's exactly why he wants to meet you," Samuel replied. Over the next hour, Samuel explained everything. How he had lived among the Apache for years after his own family was killed in a raid gone wrong. How he had learned their language and their ways. How he served as a bridge between two worlds that mostly wanted to destroy each other. How Ayita's father, a chief named Nantai, had sent him to find his daughter after she disappeared during a white settlers' attack on their camp. "They thought she was dead," Samuel said. "When I told them I'd tracked her here, to your ranch, they assumed the worst. They came ready for war. And now?" Nora asked. "Now they want peace, because of you." Nantai himself came to the house an hour later. He was smaller than Samuel, but carried himself with unmistakable authority. His face was lined with years of hard decisions and harder losses. He looked at Nora for a long moment before speaking in Apache. Samuel translated. "He says his daughter's life is worth more than all the horses in his tribe. That you gave her back to him when you could have let her die or turned her away. He asks what he can give you in return." Nora felt overwhelmed. "I don't want anything," she said. "I just did what anyone should do." When Samuel translated, Nantai shook his head and spoke again. "He says that proves you don't understand your own worth," Samuel said quietly. "He says a woman who lives alone, works this hard land by herself, and still has enough heart to save a stranger, is a woman who deserves to be protected. He's offering you his tribe's protection. If anyone threatens you or your land, they become his enemy." Nora's eyes burned with unexpected tears. For 6 years since her husband died, the town had treated her like she was invisible. The other ranchers ignored her. The women whispered about her. She had become a ghost in her own life. And now this Apache chief was offering her something no one else had: respect, recognition, worth. "Tell him I accept," she whispered, "and tell him thank you." The warriors left before noon, but Samuel remained. "Nantai asked me to stay a few days," he explained, "to make sure Ayita is healing properly and to make sure you're truly safe here." He looked uncomfortable, as if unsure how to say the next part. "He also thinks you need help with the ranch. He's not wrong." Nora wanted to argue, but she couldn't. The fence on the western pasture was falling apart. The roof leaked in 3 places. The well pump needed fixing. She'd been doing everything herself for so long that she had stopped noticing how much was falling apart around her. Or maybe she had stopped caring. "I can manage," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. "I'm sure you can," Samuel replied gently, "but maybe you don't have to." That afternoon, Samuel fixed the fence. Nora watched him from the kitchen window as she prepared food for Ayita. He moved with surprising grace for such a large man, his hands sure and capable. She found herself noticing things she had no business noticing. The way his shirt stretched across his back when he bent to hammer a post. The way he paused to wipe sweat from his forehead, his profile strong against the endless sky. The way he seemed completely comfortable in the silence of the land. She was 47 years old, too old for these feelings, too old for the flutter in her chest when he came inside and smiled at her with dust on his face and gratitude in his eyes. "Thank you for letting me help," he said. "Thank you for doing it," she replied. That night they ate together at her small table. Ayita was still weak, but managed to sit up and take some broth. Samuel translated the conversation, and Nora learned that Ayita was 19, that she had been gathering herbs near the river when the settlers attacked, that she had run for hours before collapsing near Nora's property. She learned that Ayita's mother had died in childbirth, that Nantai had raised her alone, that she was beloved by her people. "She wants to know about you," Samuel said. "She says she can see sadness in your eyes, old sadness." Nora hesitated. She rarely spoke about her past. But something about this moment, sitting at her table with a wounded Apache girl and a giant man who seemed to carry the weight of 2 worlds, made her want to be honest. "My husband died 6 years ago," she said quietly. "We never had children. I couldn't. And after he died, the town decided I wasn't worth their time anymore. I became the widow woman who lived alone, someone to pity or ignore." She looked down at her hands, work roughened and scarred. "I stopped fighting it after a while, stopped trying to matter to anyone." Samuel was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was rough with emotion. "You matter," he said simply. What you did for Aita proves that. You saw someone suffering and you didn't look away. That's not nothing. That's everything. Their eyes met across the table, and Nora felt something crack open inside her chest. A space that had been sealed tight for years. A possibility she had stopped believing in. The days that followed fell into a rhythm that felt both strange and natural. Samuel worked on the ranch during daylight hours, repairing what needed fixing, strengthening what was weak. Nora tended to Aita and managed the house. But she also found herself working alongside Samuel more often than not. They fell into an easy partnership, communicating as much through silence as through words. Aita healed quickly, her young body resilient. She began teaching Nora words in Apache, laughing gently when Nora's pronunciation was clumsy. Nora taught her some English in return. They formed a bond that transcended language. Two women who had both known what it meant to be underestimated and overlooked. One evening, as the sun set in brilliant orange and red across the desert, Samuel and Nora sat together on the porch. Aita was inside, resting. The air was cooling, bringing relief from the day's heat. "Can I ask you something?" Nora said. "Anything. Why did you choose to live with the Apache? After your family died, you could have done anything, gone anywhere." Samuel was quiet for so long that Nora thought he might not answer. When he finally spoke, his voice carried years of pain, because they understood loss in a way my own people didn't. When my wife and daughter were killed in that raid, everyone in town told me to move on, to forget, to start over. But Nantai and his people, they understood that some losses you carry forever. They didn't ask me to be anything other than broken. They let me heal in my own time. "And did you? Heal?" He turned to look at her, and in the fading light, his eyes were impossibly blue. "I learned to live with it. That's not the same as healing, but it's something." He paused. "Being here, these last few days with you, it's the first time in a long time that I've felt like maybe I could be more than just the weight of what I lost." Nora's breath caught. The air between them felt charged, heavy with things unsaid. She was acutely aware of how close he was sitting, of the warmth radiating from his body, of the way her heart was beating too fast. "I know that feeling," she whispered. Samuel's hand moved slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted to. His fingers brushed against hers where they rested on the porch railing. The touch was gentle, tentative, but it sent heat racing up her arm and into her chest. She didn't pull away. Instead, she turned her hand over, letting her palm meet his. His hand engulfed hers, rough and warm and solid. They sat like that as darkness fell, holding hands like young people discovering touch for the first time. But they weren't young, and that made this moment more precious. They knew what it meant to lose. They knew what it meant to give up, and they knew that what was happening between them was rare and fragile and worth protecting. Later that night, Nora lay in her bed, unable to sleep. The house was quiet except for the sounds of breathing from the other rooms. Samuel was sleeping in the main room, giving Nora and Aita the bedrooms. She could hear him through the thin walls, his breathing deep and steady. She thought about his hand holding hers. She thought about the way he looked at her, not with pity or judgment, but with something that felt like recognition, like he saw her, the real her, not the widow, not the woman too old to matter, just her. Her body ached with feelings she had thought were dead. Desire, longing, the need to be touched, to be held, to be reminded that she was still a woman with a woman's needs and wants. She pressed her hand against her chest, feeling her heart beating, feeling alive in a way she hadn't felt in years. The threat came 3 days later, just when Nora had started to believe that peace might actually last. A group of men rode up to the ranch in the afternoon, 7 of them, led by a man named Garrett Webb. Nora recognized him immediately. He was a land speculator who had been trying to buy up property in the area for the railroad. He had approached her twice before, and both times she had refused to sell. "Mrs. Callahan," he said, not bothering to dismount. I heard you've been harboring an Apache in your home. That true? Nora stepped onto the porch, very aware that Samuel was in the barn and Aita was inside the house. What business is it of yours who I help? Webb smiled, but there was no warmth in it. It's everyone's business when you're putting the whole territory at risk. Those savages attacked a settlement last month, killed 5 people, and you're protecting one of them? The girl I helped was shot by white men, Nora said, her voice steady despite the fear crawling up her spine. She's 19 years old and she was injured. I did what any decent person would do. Decent people don't side with Indians over their own kind, Webb said. His men shifted in their saddles, hands moving closer to their guns. I'm here to make you one final offer, Mrs. Callahan. Sell me this land. Take the money and leave, because if you stay here, if you keep helping those savages, you're going to find yourself in more trouble than you can handle. Before Nora could respond, Samuel emerged from the barn. Even at a distance, his size was intimidating. He walked toward the house with measured steps, his face calm, but his eyes hard. I think you should leave, Samuel said quietly. Webb looked at him with contempt. And who the hell are you? Someone who knows that Nantai has sworn to protect this woman and her land. You threaten her. You threaten his daughter who she saved. You're starting a war you can't win. Nantai, Webb spat. That chief is nothing. The army's going to wipe them out within a year. And when they do, this land is going to be worth triple what I'm offering now. He looked back at Nora. You've got 1 week to decide. Sell or face the consequences. They rode off in a cloud of dust, leaving silence in their wake. Nora realized she was shaking. Samuel was beside her in an instant, his hand on her shoulder, steady and grounding. He won't stop, Nora said. Men like him never do. I know, Samuel replied. But you're not alone anymore. You understand that, don't you? Nora looked up at him. This giant man who had appeared in her life like an answer to a prayer she hadn't known she was praying. I'm starting to. That evening, Nora, Samuel, and Aita sat together planning what to do. Aita, though still recovering, was adamant. She sent word to her father through Samuel. Within hours, a response came back. Nantai was sending warriors to watch over the ranch. Anyone who threatened Nora would answer to him. This is my fault, Nora said, her voice thick with guilt. I've brought this on myself by helping Aita. Aita spoke rapidly in Apache, her eyes fierce. Samuel translated. She says you gave her life. That protecting you is honor, not burden. That you are sister now. The word hit Nora like a physical blow. Sister. She had never had a sister. Never had that kind of connection with another woman. Tears spilled down her cheeks before she could stop them. That night, after Aita had gone to bed, Nora and Samuel sat together in the main room. The lamp burned low between them, casting soft shadows on the walls. Nora felt raw, exposed, every emotion too close to the surface. I don't know how to do this, she admitted. I've been alone so long. I don't know how to let people help me, how to let people in. Samuel leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, his face serious. I don't either, he said. After my family died, I built walls so high I thought nothing could get over them. But then I met Nantai's people, and they showed me that walls don't protect you. They just keep you trapped. He paused. Being here with you these last few days, those walls are crumbling, and it terrifies me. Why? Nora whispered. Because I'm starting to feel things I swore I'd never feel again. Because when I look at you, I see someone I could. He stopped, as if the words were too dangerous to speak. Could what? He met her eyes. Someone I could love. The air left Nora's lungs. Her heart hammered against her ribs. She should say something. She should pull back. She should protect herself. But instead, she stood and crossed the small space between them. She stood in front of him, close enough to feel the heat from his body, close enough to see the pulse beating in his throat. I'm 47 years old, she said, her voice shaking. I'm not young. I'm not beautiful. I don't know how to be what someone wants anymore. Samuel stood, towering over her, but his touch when it came was infinitely gentle. He cupped her face in his large hands, tilting her head up so she had to look at him. "You're wrong," he said roughly. "You're beautiful, you're strong, you're brave, and I want you exactly as you are." He kissed her then, slow and deep, and Nora felt herself falling. His mouth was warm, his lips firm but tender. She gripped his shirt, pulling him closer, needing to feel his solidity, his realness. The kiss deepened, and heat bloomed through her body like wildfire, burning away years of loneliness and doubt. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Nora felt dizzy. Samuel rested his forehead against hers, his hands still cradling her face. "Tell me to stop," he whispered. "Tell me if this is too much." "Don't stop," she breathed. "Please don't stop." He kissed her again, and this time there was more urgency, more need. His hands moved down her shoulders, her back, pulling her against him. Nora had forgotten what this felt like, to be wanted, to be desired. Her body came alive under his touch, every nerve ending singing. They moved together toward her bedroom, a tangle of reaching hands and desperate kisses. When they reached her bed, Samuel paused, looking down at her with such tenderness that it made her ache. "Are you sure?" he asked. "I've never been more sure of anything." What followed was slow and reverent, a rediscovery of sensation and connection. Samuel touched her like she was precious, like every inch of her skin mattered. He traced the lines of her body with his fingers, his mouth learning her. Nora felt exposed in a way that went beyond physical nakedness. She felt seen, truly seen, maybe for the first time in her life. Their joining was quiet and intense, a building of pressure and release that left them both shaking. Nora had forgotten this, the vulnerability of intimacy, the way pleasure could break you open and put you back together different than before. When it was over, they lay tangled together, skin against skin, heartbeats gradually slowing. "Stay with me," Nora whispered into the darkness. "Not just tonight. Stay." Samuel's arms tightened around her. "Yes," he said simply. "Yes." The attack came at dawn 2 days later. Webb and his men rode in shooting, setting fire to the barn, destroying fences, trying to drive Nora off her land through terror. But they hadn't counted on the Apache warriors who had been watching from the hills. Within minutes, Webb's men were surrounded, outnumbered 3-1. Nantai himself rode in, his face terrible in its anger. He spoke to Webb in English, each word sharp as a knife. "You threaten the woman who saved my daughter. You bring violence to land under my protection. You have made enemy of people who wanted only peace." Webb's bravado crumbled. "We didn't know," he stammered. "We didn't realize." "You did not care to know," Nantai replied. "You saw only what you wanted. But my daughter sees this woman's heart. My friend Samuel sees her worth. And now I see it too. You will leave this land. You will not return. If you do, you will not leave alive." Webb and his men fled, beaten and humiliated. The warriors helped put out the fire, saving most of the barn. As the sun climbed higher, Nora stood with Samuel and Aita, watching the Apaches work. "I don't understand why they're doing this," Nora said quietly. "I'm nobody." Aita spoke in halting English, the words carefully chosen. "You are woman who sees people, not color of skin. You are woman with brave heart. You are sister. That is not nobody." In the weeks that followed, the ranch transformed. With Samuel's help and the occasional assistance of Nantai's warriors, Nora's property became prosperous in ways it never had been. Fences were mended. The barn was rebuilt, stronger than before. The well was deepened. Crops that had barely survived now thrived. But more than the physical changes, Nora herself transformed. She laughed more easily. She stood taller. She spoke with confidence to the townspeople who had once ignored her, because she knew now that she wasn't alone. She had Samuel, who loved her with a quiet fierceness that still took her breath away. She had Aita, who visited often and called her sister. She had the protection and respect of Nantai's tribe. One evening, months after that first morning when warriors had surrounded her ranch, Nora and Samuel sat together on the porch, watching the sunset. His arm was around her shoulders, her head resting against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked. "Staying here with me instead of returning to the tribe?" Samuel was quiet for a moment. "I'm with the tribe," he said finally. "Nantai still calls on me when he needs a translator or a bridge between worlds. I still visit the camps, still help where I can. But my home is here now, with you." He pressed a kiss to the top of her head. "You're my family now, Nora." She turned in his arms to look at him, this giant man who had saved her in ways he probably didn't even understand. "And you're mine," she whispered. They kissed as the sun painted the sky in shades of orange and gold, two people who had been broken and lost finding wholeness in each other. The desert wind whispered around them, carrying the scent of sage and possibility. Ayita visited the next day, bringing herbs and laughter. The three of them sat together preparing a meal, talking about everything and nothing, creating the kind of ordinary moments that make up a life. Nora looked at these two people, so different from her but so deeply connected, and felt a joy so profound it frightened her. "What is it?" Samuel asked, noticing the tears in her eyes. "I'm happy," she said simply. "I forgot what that felt like." Later, as night fell and Ayita rode back to her father's camp, Samuel and Nora lay together in her bed. His large frame made the small bed seem smaller, but Nora loved the way he surrounded her, the way she felt safe and protected in his arms. "Tell me a story," she murmured, her fingers tracing patterns on his chest. "What kind of story?" "Any kind. Just let me hear your voice." So Samuel told her about the first time he saw the desert bloom after rain, how the whole landscape transformed overnight into a riot of color and life. He told her about learning to track from Nantai, about the patience it required, the attention to detail. He told her about his daughter, the one he had lost, how she used to laugh at the smallest things, how remembering her didn't hurt quite as much anymore. Nora listened, her heart expanding with love for this man who trusted her with his pain, his memories, his hope. When he finished speaking, she kissed him, pouring everything she felt into that kiss. Their lovemaking that night was different from before, less desperate, more sure. They moved together, with the ease of long-time lovers, building slowly toward a peak that left them both gasping and complete. The seasons changed. Summer's brutal heat gave way to autumn's cooler days. Nora's ranch continued to thrive. Word spread of the widow woman who had earned the Apache's protection, and people's attitudes slowly shifted. What had once been whispers of disapproval became grudging respect. One afternoon, a young woman from town appeared at Nora's door. She was pregnant and alone, her family having cast her out. She had heard that Nora helped people who needed it. Could she stay for a while? Nora looked at this girl, barely 20, her eyes full of shame and fear and desperate hope. She thought about her own inability to have children, the years of grief that had caused. She thought about Ayita, bleeding and scared, stumbling onto her property. She thought about all the people who had helped her when she needed it most. "Of course you can stay," Nora said, opening the door wider. "Come in." Samuel, working nearby, caught Nora's eye and smiled. That night, as they prepared the spare room for their new guest, he pulled Nora close. "You're building something here," he said quietly. "A place where people who don't fit anywhere else can find home." "We're building it," Nora corrected. "You and me together." "You and me together," he repeated, and kissed her softly. More people came over time. An old man with nowhere to go, a mixed-race child abandoned by both communities, a wounded soldier trying to forget a war. Nora's ranch became a refuge, a place where the broken and the lost could heal and find their worth again. Ayita became a permanent fixture, teaching the residents about Apache medicine and ways of living in harmony with the harsh land. Nantai visited regularly, bringing gifts and protection, forging an alliance between his people and this strange collection of outcasts that defied all convention. On the first anniversary of the morning when warriors had surrounded her ranch, Nora woke before dawn and slipped out of bed, careful not to wake Samuel. She walked out onto the porch and watched the sun rise over the desert, painting the sky in brilliant colors. She thought about the woman she had been a year ago, alone, resigned, convinced her life was over, that she had nothing left to offer or receive. She thought about how wrong she had been. Samuel came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist, his chin resting on top of her head. They stood like that in comfortable silence as the day began. "What are you thinking about?" he asked eventually. "About how I almost let fear stop me from helping Ayita," Nora said. "About how different my life would be if I had turned her away. But you didn't." "No, I didn't." She turned in his arms to face him. "I stopped letting fear make my decisions, and everything changed." Samuel cupped her face in his hands, his eyes infinitely tender. "You changed my life too, Nora Callahan. You gave me a reason to believe in new beginnings." They kissed as the sun climbed higher, two souls who had found each other against impossible odds and built something beautiful from the ashes of their separate losses. Inside the house, their unlikely family was waking. The pregnant girl, the old man, the abandoned child, the wounded soldier, all of them finding purpose and belonging under Nora's roof, all of them proof that sometimes the most broken pieces can create the most beautiful mosaics. Nora pulled back from Samuel's kiss and smiled, a real smile, full of joy and hope and absolute certainty. "Come on," she said, taking his hand. "Let's make breakfast for everyone." As they walked back into the house together, the morning light streaming through the windows, Nora felt complete in a way she never had before. She had spent so many years believing she wasn't enough, that her best days were behind her, that she had nothing valuable to offer the world. But she had been wrong about all of it. Her best days hadn't been behind her. They had been waiting, patient as the desert itself, for the moment when she would be brave enough to reach out and claim them. And she had, with both hands, and she was never letting go.